Emily was only 24 years old, full of hope and excitement about her future. She had just married the man she believed to be her soulmate. The wedding had been everything she dreamed of, a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family, laughter, and promises of forever. For months, Emily had imagined this day as the start of a happy life filled with love and trust. She wore her white dress with pride, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. Her heart was full of dreams about the life she would build with her new husband. But beneath the smiles and celebrations, something was not right. At first, Emily chose to believe that everything was perfect. She thought that the small things she noticed, the hushed phone calls, the sudden disappearances, were just signs of normal life adjusting to marriage. She convinced herself that her husband loved her deeply and that their future was bright. The days after the wedding were supposed to be joyful and full of promise. Instead, they became the beginning of a dark and painful journey she never expected. It was a cruel twist of fate that just 1 week after their wedding, Emily discovered the terrible truth. What she found shattered her world completely. The man she had trusted with her heart and soul had been unfaithful. Worse, the betrayal was not hidden far away, it was close, too close. The other woman was someone Emily had known and never suspected. The discovery was like a sharp blow, tearing through the dreams and hopes she had held so tightly. The pain was overwhelming, and for a moment, Emily felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. In the days that followed, Emily wrestled with a storm of emotions. She felt hurt, angry, confused, and lost all at once. The betrayal cut deeper than she had ever imagined possible. Her sense of trust was broken, and the person she had promised forever to was now the source of her deepest pain. She struggled to make sense of what had happened, questioning everything about her life and her marriage. The bright future she had envisioned now seemed like a distant memory, slipping further away with each passing hour. Despite the heartbreak, Emily refused to let despair take over completely. Instead of sinking into sadness, she began to find a quiet strength within herself. The pain, while immense, sparked something fierce, a determination to not be destroyed by the betrayal. She knew that her life could still have meaning beyond this dark moment. Slowly, she started to think about what she needed to do to take control of her future. Emily understood that she had to confront the reality before her, no matter how difficult or frightening it might be. This first week after the wedding, meant to be filled with joy, became a turning point in Emily's life. It marked the end of innocence and the beginning of a fight for her own dignity and self-respect. She realized that healing would not come from hiding or running away but from facing the pain head-on. The strength she discovered in herself during this time was the first step toward reclaiming her life. What seemed like a cruel nightmare was also the moment when Emily began to transform, setting her on a path that would change everything. Emily's discovery of her husband's betrayal hit her like a tidal wave. The shock was unbearable, but what made it worse was knowing the other woman was someone she had trusted, someone from her own circle. The person who had smiled at her at gatherings, who had shared conversations and laughter, had been secretly involved with her husband. The sense of betrayal was not just from her husband, it felt like a double stab from someone she had considered a friend. This betrayal was more than infidelity, it was a complete violation of everything Emily believed about trust, loyalty, and love. For hours, she sat in silence, unable to cry or scream. Her mind was flooded with questions she couldn't answer. How long had it been going on? Why had she never seen the signs? What did it all mean for her future? The pain was raw and confusing. At times, she felt numb, like her heart had turned to stone. The dreams she had held so tightly now seemed fragile and broken beyond repair. It was as if the ground beneath her had cracked wide open, threatening to swallow her whole. Despite the depth of her hurt, Emily refused to let despair control her. She knew she couldn't change the past, but she could decide what her future would look like. The shock was transforming into anger, a quiet, burning fire inside her that refused to die out. This anger was not about revenge, it was about reclaiming her dignity and refusing to be a victim of someone else's selfish actions. Emily decided she would not let this betrayal define her or destroy her spirit. She began to focus on herself, trying to understand what she wanted and who she was beyond the pain. This was not an easy process. It required her to face uncomfortable truths and confront feelings she had been hiding. There were moments of loneliness and sadness, but also moments of clarity and strength. Emily found that even in the darkest hours, there was a part of her that refused to give up. It was this part, the part that still believed in her worth, that kept her moving forward. The weeks after the discovery were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Emily cut off contact with her husband and the other woman, realizing that distance was necessary to protect her heart. She spent time with close friends who supported her quietly, offering comfort without judgment. Gradually, she began to rebuild her sense of self, piece by piece. She learned that healing was not linear, it came with setbacks, tears, and moments of hope. As Emily faced the reality of her broken marriage, she made a decision that surprised many who knew her. Instead of retreating into silence or bitterness, she chose to stand tall and face the consequences head-on. She was determined to take control of her life and make sure that the betrayal did not have the final word. This was her fight, and she was ready to win it, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been hurt by betrayal. The pain was still there, but so was the promise of something new. Emily's story was far from over. She was beginning to discover that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the darkest moments, and that even when trust is broken, courage can rebuild what has been lost. After the betrayal, Emily's life felt like a broken mirror, shattered pieces scattered everywhere, reflecting pain and confusion. But instead of letting herself be overwhelmed, she chose to gather those pieces, one by one, and begin to put them back together. She realized that the pain she was feeling was not the end of her story but the beginning of a new chapter. It was in this brokenness that she found an unexpected source of strength. Every day became a small victory as she fought to rise above the heartbreak and reclaim her identity. Emily started to take control of her life in ways she never had before. She focused on what made her happy and what gave her purpose beyond the betrayal. She took up new hobbies, spent time with people who truly cared for her, and allowed herself moments of quiet reflection. Instead of being consumed by anger or sadness, she used those feelings as fuel to move forward. Her determination was fierce. She was no longer the innocent woman caught in a painful situation, she was becoming someone stronger, someone who would not let the actions of others define her worth. The process of healing was slow and filled with challenges. Some days, Emily felt like giving up. The weight of her emotions was heavy, and the memories of betrayal were hard to escape. But every time she stumbled, she reminded herself of why she had to keep going. She had a future to protect, a future she would build on her own terms. She refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she chose hope. Hope that she could find peace again, hope that she could rebuild trust in herself and the world around her. One of the most important lessons Emily learned during this time was forgiveness, not for the sake of the people who hurt her, but for herself. She understood that holding on to anger would only keep her chained to the past. Forgiving did not mean forgetting or excusing what happened, it meant freeing herself from the pain that threatened to control her life. This realization brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt since the betrayal. As she continued to grow stronger, Emily also began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with her husband and the other woman. It was not a decision made out of hatred but one made out of necessity. She needed to face the situation fully and bring closure to a chapter that had caused so much pain. This was about standing up for herself and refusing to be pushed aside. She wanted the truth to be known and justice to be served, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of her life. Emily's courage inspired those around her. People admired her resilience and the way she refused to be defined by tragedy. She became a symbol of hope for anyone who had faced betrayal or heartbreak. Her story showed that even in the darkest moments, there is a path to light. Emily's journey was not just about survival, it was about transformation. From the ashes of her broken marriage, she was rising, ready to face whatever came next with strength and grace. As the days passed, Emily felt a growing sense of resolve. She knew that she could no longer avoid the painful reality any longer. The confrontation with her husband and the other woman was inevitable, and she prepared herself mentally and emotionally for what lay ahead. This was not about revenge or anger, this was about reclaiming her power and demanding the respect she deserved. The betrayal had been a brutal blow, but Emily refused to be broken by it. Instead, she chose to face the situation head-on, ready to fight for justice and her own peace of mind. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her, but Emily's determination only grew stronger. She understood that what she was about to do could change everything, but it was a necessary step on her path to healing. The weeks leading up to the confrontation were filled with preparation and reflection. She spent time gathering her thoughts, making plans, and focusing on what she needed to say and do. This was her story, and she was determined to tell it in her own way, without fear or hesitation. When the day finally came, Emily stood firm, feeling a mixture of fear and strength. The encounter was intense and emotional, forcing her to face the truth in a way she never wanted but had to endure. It was a moment of reckoning for all involved. The lies, the betrayals, and the broken promises came to light, leaving no room for denial or excuses. Emily's courage in that moment was remarkable. She did not crumble under the pressure. Instead, she stood tall, refusing to be silenced or dismissed. What followed was a whirlwind of consequences. The truth that Emily exposed could not be ignored, and it rippled through the lives of everyone involved. Friends and family were shocked, and the community around them was shaken. Yet, through it all, Emily remained steady, a pillar of strength amid the chaos. Her actions showed that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of justice and truth prevailing. She proved that no one should tolerate betrayal or deceit, no matter how painful the path to confrontation may be. Though the confrontation brought some closure, it also marked the beginning of a new struggle. Emily had to navigate the aftermath, the legal battles, the gossip, and the emotional fallout. It was not easy, but she was ready. She had learned to lean on her own strength and the support of those who truly cared for her. The fight was far from over, but Emily was no longer the same woman who had stood silently just a week before. She was now a warrior, ready to defend her dignity and protect her future at all costs. This chapter of Emily's story was about transformation and empowerment. It was about choosing to stand up for oneself, even when the cost is high. Her journey inspired many to believe in their own strength and to never let betrayal define their worth. Emily's story was a powerful reminder that courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to face it anyway. In the face of unimaginable pain, she found the power to take control and write the next chapter of her life. The storm had passed, but the aftermath was something Emily had to face with steady hands and a calm mind. Her life no longer resembled the one she had imagined on her wedding day. The man she had once loved was now a distant memory, and the world she had built with him had collapsed. But in the ruins of that broken relationship, Emily found something unexpected: freedom. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe without fear, speak without hesitation, and live without pretending. Her heart, though scarred, beat with a new rhythm, stronger, wiser, and more focused. In the months that followed, Emily made the choice to completely rebuild her life. She moved to a new place, far from the people and places tied to her pain. She enrolled in classes she had always put off and picked up a new job that gave her both independence and purpose. She created routines that brought peace, surrounded herself with positive people, and let go of anything that no longer served her growth. These weren't just small changes, they were signs of a woman who had decided to take full control of her future. The whispers and judgment she once feared no longer held power over her. Emily learned that people would talk no matter what, and their opinions were not her responsibility. What mattered now was her own voice, her own path, and the way she had turned tragedy into transformation. She shared her story not for sympathy, but to show others that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and built slowly after everything else has been stripped away. Through it all, Emily remained grounded. She didn't claim to have all the answers or pretend that healing had been easy. There were still nights when the pain returned uninvited, and memories tried to pull her back into the past. But each time, she faced them without fear. She had survived betrayal, loss, and humiliation, and through that, discovered the kind of strength that can't be taught, only earned. She was no longer a victim of someone else's cruelty. She was the author of her own story, and she had rewritten the ending. Emily's story became a quiet source of inspiration. Not because it ended perfectly, but because it showed what real resilience looks like. It wasn't about revenge or rage, it was about reclaiming power, choosing healing, and walking away from what was never meant for her. She had learned to love herself in a deeper way, to trust herself again, and to protect her peace no matter what. Her journey wasn't defined by what had happened to her, but by how she chose to rise from it. By the time a year had passed, Emily was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. She didn't need closure from those who hurt her. She had already found it within herself. Her story stood as a reminder that even after being broken, it is still possible to begin again, stronger, smarter, and completely unafraid of the future. Emily was living proof that sometimes the worst endings lead to the best beginnings.